This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
It's 11:07 at WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast, and you are on Ask a Rabbi.
Hello, this is Rabbi Shafir Loeb for Congregation Eitz Chayim. Yeah, trying to get.
You're strangling
I'm
yourself
strangling
over there.
myself, pulling the mask off and my ear with it, and yeah. Give me 1 second here because this was misbehaving. But here we go. Now we're posted. Okay, yay. Happiness is, right?
Cell technology.
Cell technology. You know, it's a great thing.
When it works.
That is true.
Well, only when it works.
When it works. You're absolutely correct. And so, yeah. Hopefully that'll handle itself. So, anyway, welcome to Friday. It is the tail end of the counting of the days between Passover and Shavuot, which starts Sunday night. And it's actually one of the major holidays, but the standard joke is that Jews don't know about it because it happens, after summer break starts. So they don't learn it. Well, they don't learn as much about it in school, right? You think about it. Right, the holidays that occur during the school year are much better known because the students observe the holidays, right, and their parents with them during the school year. It's worked into the curriculum, but not so true when you get to the holidays that occur between the classes. Right, over
That's
summer break.
funny. Well, and I remember all my Jewish classmates at Loyola. They loved it. They got all their holidays and they got all of ours. So they had the best of both worlds.
Well, if as long as you get the holidays, I think of. So there's this American concept of a holiday, right? A holiday is a party time. It's a time to take a break and do what you want. That's really not the Jewish concept of a holiday. The Jewish concept of a holiday is it's a day to come together and to pray as a community, which, of course, in COVID has been over the top difficult.
Oh, yeah.
And, that has definitely played into so many things that we've done. And now that we have the new CDC guidelines, do we switch around, change around what we're going to do for the High Holy Days season? Those are all questions that my board's going to have some long discussions on. What do we do? How fast do we snap back?
Well, realistically, the High Holy Days are what, 4 months from now? 3 months.
June, July, August, 3 months.
Yeah, 3 months.
Yeah.
Unless there's a huge wave that comes back on us, I would think you'd be fine.
India.
Well, and
whatever.
I found out talking to some of my buddies at NBC Sports that there are some major problems in Tokyo right now, and with COVID, and it's actually they have delayed their sending of their crews, although they've got hundreds of people over there already. But the rest of the telecast crews are not going to be heading there anytime soon.
Those are all very serious, very real considerations. And, I listen to some people who say, well, now we're post-pandemic. And it's like, not really. Not really. We still don't have a lot of questions answered, and there's still far too many people who, for whatever reasons, have not yet been vaccinated. There's still a lot of people waiting on their second shots, and
we had one of your fellow professors from IRSC in here last night, and he was talking about the hybrid courses for the fall, and that there still were a lot of students that were
Reluctant.
going to enroll in those.
Oh, and yeah. The hybrid classes have been mostly successful, and the few students, nobody has that we know of has picked up COVID on campus, but the few students who've been exposed or had family members exposed has been very well contained by the college. And, my hat's off to them. My alma mater went back to classes, normal class schedule on campus, but every student was tested every week.
Whoa, yeah. Well,
So
we've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
right. So
I know that.
That's a serious commitment as well to keep a population safe.
Well, I'll tell you, at your college, it was remarkable what Scott Kimmelman and his crew in the athletic department did to get us through everything. Mm-hmm. Softball and baseball both went to the state tournament this past week, but all of us made it through it.
Yeah.
Which was, I think, remarkable when you're talking about hundreds of athletes.
Yeah. Well, and again, I'd like to think that we're through it. I'll believe that a year from now.
There you go.
There's a provision in Torah that says, how do you know a false prophet? And the answer is that you check and see if their prophecies come true.
Okay.
Right. So you can't judge in the moment.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You don't know you really don't know who's leading you forward and who's leading you backward until you see some distance traveled.
Mm-hmm.
Got
to have some historical perspective.
Yeah. Well, so you think, so let me put it in this perspective. Moses is sitting there with the Israelites, and the Israelites are staring at the Egyptians because they don't see any way to go. There's no place to turn, and Egyptians coming in war chariots and making all their noise, they're whooping and everything that war chariots do, which is to intimidate and scare the population that they're about to attack. And it's working. Okay, and everybody's staring at the problem, the approaching Egyptians, because you can hear it well in a desert. You can hear lots of little tiny sounds at great distance because there's not buildings and trees and all the other stuff to absorb it. And they're about to miss the parting of the sea. Right? And so Moses is saying, no, look over here at this impassable wall of water, or this reed swamp, actually, but, look this way so that you can see what's going to happen. And it's a hard thing. How do you know if somebody's really leading you across the sea on dry land or leading you into a trap?
So they weren't asking him how to turn the tablet on. Oh, I'm sorry. That's terrible. That's awful.
One of the things that my students at IRSC that unfortunately is that doesn't translate well into the online, although it's there inside the PowerPoints and all of this stuff that I give the students, and it's in some of my lectures, but I have a very dry sense of humor. And one of the cartoons that I show in my religion class is Moses walking down with 2 iPads. Right. The tablets.
Oh,
that and of course the other 5 that fell. Thank you. History of the World, Part 1.
Oh, yes. And Mel Brooks' entry.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah. Children of Israel, I have 15 laws. Oops. 5.
Oh, my. I think Stuart is still with us. I think he just wants
hi, Stuart. I can't see you.
Hi, Rabbi.
Hi, you're behind a counter.
Yes, I was passed a note as my show was ending, and I didn't get to read it because I was so occupied with what I was saying. But Lisa and Aaron and I would like to express our condolences to you for your brother Jacob, I understand, passed away just a couple days ago in Michigan.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart.
I think as founding president of Congregation Eitz Chayim, I'm fairly safe in saying the entire congregation sends its condolences to you and hopes that as soon as possible. Any pain, any hardship, any grief that you're going through as part of the process turns only into happy memories.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you
right.
very much.
That's tough. Ooh.
Yeah, it's so he was my oldest brother, and he just passed. They live in Marquette. Actually, they live in the outskirts of Marquette. I'm not sure how you live in the outskirts of a tiny town.
Northern Michigan.
Yeah, they live in Upper, right?
Ooh.
Upper Peninsula.
Yep.
Yep, Uppers. Yeah. And so he had a beautiful and Candace, his wife, his widow, still lives on the land, but it's a beautiful wooded piece of property. And he used to. Candace was saying last night at we do a Zoom Shiva because obviously I'm not in Michigan to be there for it. Thank you, technology, for making it possible.
Sure.
And she was saying that he used to tap somewhere between 40 and 60 trees to make maple syrup.
Oh, God, that would be cool.
Yeah, I've got one jar in my
Pantry.
Thank you.
There you go.
Sometimers, yeah, in my pantry, and so that's one of the things that aggravates during grief. You get some of that spacey stuff, and but yeah, I have one jar unopened that I've been holding on to, and when I finally do open it, it's going to be parsed very much.
Yeah,
because
wow.
it takes. People don't realize how difficult maple syrup is. An American food. Most of the rest of the world doesn't know from it. Comes from the sugar maples that can't grow them in Florida, or at least you can't get the sap flow that you get in the north, because you need the freezing temperatures to cause the roots to do their thing, that when the tree starts to awaken in spring, that the sap starts to run, and you have to catch the sap in a very brief period of time when the nights are still below freezing but the days are above. And that's the season before the trees really put out any leaves, because once they start to do that, then all of the sugar has traveled up the tree to nourish the new growth. And the tapping doesn't hinder that, because you're not taking that much out.
Right. Wow. Yeah, well, that's really big up in Vermont and Maine. And yeah.
Right. And you get out of an average tree, you get about 10 gallons of sap. And that might sound like a lot, but it takes 40 gallons of sap, boiled very carefully, to give you 1 gallon. 40 gallons of sap to get 1 gallon of syrup.
Wow.
Yeah, it really, really, really has to boil off. So those 40 to 60 trees, yes, he got quite a bit, but it takes 4 trees to make a gallon of syrup.
Wow.
So he's only making 10 to 15 gallons, and I'm sure that they gave them away. And Candace was saying that she has 3 or 4 containers left. He stopped doing it in 2013. He stopped doing the tapping because it was.
Well, that's got to be pretty rigorous work there.
Yeah, it is. It's very rigorous work.
Whoa.
And and I am definitely the baby of the family, because my brothers were all born in the 40s, and I was not. I was much later. So, yeah, they remember things that I only know by being told about them. So,
wow.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
And as Stuart mentioned, Jacob did come down through. He and his wife visited a couple of summers ago in Port St. Lucie, and among other things, actually taught me something I did not know, which was how to bake challah. My mother had never baked it. She didn't have time to bake it with everything else she was doing, and so we always had from a bakery.
Sure.
Challah. Not a surprising thing. And my mother was an amazing cook. She was a really good baker, but she did not do much baking. Mostly she did some really specialty, wonderful meals that, I miss. Some of them I know how to make, and some of them, they're a real pain to make. She made a kind of a crepe Suzette meal that was over the top delicious.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that sounds good.
And she made an apple strudel that's an incredible amount of effort. Involved our entire dining room. She would stretch the dough, and as she's stretching it, and I mean it's so thin that you can see through it, and she's complaining that she can't get it as thin as her mother did. You know? And I've made it, and I make a decent apple strudel when I make it, but you're talking about a ton of effort. You know, nowadays I could probably, cheat a little bit and get some pre-sliced apples, and a lot of the ingredients are easier to get than they were for her. She would actually chop the nuts, and she would slice the apples. Actually, rephrase that. I sliced the apples.
I was going to say, yeah.
For the apple strudel. And, and the dough was stretched over our entire dining room table on a very special cloth that she had for that purpose. And then she would roll it up using the tablecloth, and it formed these a big U shape that she would put in the oven. She would bake as many as 2 of them at a time. And I remember one Shabbat, one Friday night, she had made it that Thursday. And she didn't do it very often because of the labor-intensive nature of it. And my father from the Bima announced to everybody, after the Oneg Shabbat, after the refreshments here, come over to the house because my wife just baked apple strudel. I thought she was going to kill him. Needless to say, and in those days, we lived in a parsonage. We lived in a house on the temple property.
Okay.
And, it was a half a block walk at most. So, of course, everybody followed my father out of the building and right into the house. And, my mother...
Dad's in the doghouse.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that took about a week for my mother to calm down.
So how many of you were there in the family?
Well, okay. Long piece. My father actually had a first wife, and my mother was his second wife.
Mm-hmm.
So he had 2 sons with his first wife, and to Stuart, they were born in Jersey. No, I take that back. They were born in New York, and they moved to Jersey, the Borden family. And they had chicken farms and bakeries and things like that. And that's actually where my brothers learned to bake.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. And then my mother had my third brother very early on. He's also from the 40s. And then as he was leaving, there along came I. And it's not that my mother didn't want other children. She did. I was told often that she had 2 miscarriages between my brother and me, and I know she had 1 miscarriage after me.
Oh, gosh.
So my mother was fertile for a good long time. And, I remember that miscarriage. I was very, very young. We were at a hotel, and something there was like a fender bender kind of thing, and that triggered the miscarriage.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
Yeah. And that's part of why I probably remember it, because I was not very old when that happened. So I would have had a little tiny brother or sister along with me. But we used to tell my mother that she had 2 only children. So, and we really didn't have contact with my 2 older brothers. And one of them moved to Israel and passed a few years ago. And the other one just passed now, the older one. The younger one passed earlier. In my father's family, heart conditions take a lot of the males very early.
Yeah.
And it's not that they don't. I'm not going to say that my father lived smartly, but his kids did. And, you're still not going to overcome genetics.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's still challenges. And sometimes they catch them and sometimes they don't. So.
Sure. Yeah, we're getting into this debate yesterday at the Treasure Coast Business Summit about the efficacy, I guess, of the vaccines. This was with a naturopathic type doctor, And boy, he was talking about rewriting the RNA, and that we won't know for several years what this is actually going to do to the body. I'm sitting here, oh great, I have 2 shots. But yeah, we don't know.
Well, so the way that the body fights off a virus, any virus, is the T cells. And I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, so.
You play one on television, though?
I do not play one on television,
gotcha,
nor did I
okay.
stay at Holiday Inn Express. Not going any of those places. But, but basically what is explained in the public literature is that what a vaccine does is it teaches the body early how to fight off an invading virus.
Right.
And so you're putting in a training manual, if you will, in your body, and so that if it encounters the virus, it knows what to do. And I always caution people, because coronaviruses are not new. They're not new, and there are many of them around. Not all of them attack humans. Many of them attack other animals and other species, and we don't know all of the cats in New York Zoo got COVID, right? The big cats.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
All right, and there have been a couple of domestic animals that have gotten at least a light case of it, but there is not widespread species jump to house pets at this point. But for some reason, the big cats in the zoo picked it up, and we'll someday figure out how and why, or maybe they know, I don't know. But I've talked about it other times. Dogs get vaccinated. My dogs are vaccinated against canine coronavirus. It's a particular coronavirus. The word corona refers to the shape of the virus when it's looked at by a very high power microscope. And so it's all the viruses that have those kinds of mechanisms. And they attack the human cells, or in the case of the canine coronavirus, the dog cells, in certain ways. And scientists and pathologists are much more attuned to how and why and all of that.
I forgot to ask you before we started the show, did you happen to catch 60 Minutes last Sunday?
No, I did not. What was it talking about?
An incredible segment on this brigade of Jewish soldiers in World War II who turned out to be part of this espionage group that is psychological warfare against the Germans. And, you've got to see it. It's 2 segments long.
Okay.
And it is amazing. They interviewed, I think, 3 or 4 of the guys who are still around. They're way up in their 90s. A couple of them swim every day. I mean, they exercise every day. But, I mean, they talked about just exactly, they were named Richie, was it Richie Boys? I think that's what it was, from the military base in Maryland. Mm-hmm. And it was a base that nobody knew about for obvious reasons. Yeah. And but, oh, my gosh, what amazing people they were, and how they could lure some of these soldiers into giving them secrets and stuff. It was, wow. Yeah. It was amazing. And they saved a lot of lives. Mm-hmm. They saved a ton of lives. It was,
war is messy, period.
Yeah.
And now a lot of that kind of information is gathered from eavesdropping and intercepting phone calls and breaking encryptions and hacking into things and all of that stuff.
Well, apparently the story of these guys wasn't even released until 2012 because it was considered classified. And so it's like, really? From World War II. But yeah.
Well, because of the techniques.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And,
It was amazing. But yeah, I thought of you immediately. Carol and I are watching this thing going, wow.
Should have texted me and said.
I should have. I totally forgot about it this week, but yeah.
That's okay. Yeah, it's been another crazy week in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't going to get into that at all, but crazy week in Israel, that's for sure.
Yeah, my heart goes out to everybody in the area who is. It's nasty on all sides, and and here's the piece, right? Here I sit in America. I don't have the stuff going on in my life that either side or any of the 17 sides of the conflict or my sister-in-law calls it a war. Her kids kind of didn't respond to that on the Zoom call, but so I'll share something. We don't have any perception. My sister-in-law goes to the bomb shelter on an average of twice a night.
Oh,
because she lives outside of Jerusalem, and she's close enough to where the rockets are hitting. And it was kind of interesting because during the Zoom gathering that we had for the family, it was at midnight in Israel, so it's 5:00 here, and her alarm on her phone went off, alerting her to go to the shelter, and but it wasn't for her community. They're able to identify.
Oh, they've zeroed that.
They've zeroed that in.
Oh my goodness!
And she was like, "Oh, I apologize that it's going off. We get it for all the local communities, because you get it by region apparently." And her son is like, "You need to set that up in the settings." The typical, young the children explaining to the parents how to do it.
Oh yeah.
And he's a computer person, so yeah. So he definitely knows how to do it. He's going to fix her phone so that she doesn't get all the neighboring warnings. But here's the side comment to all of that, which is that my nephew, his comment was that they just sleep in the bunkers so that the kids can sleep the night through. And we have no perception of what that is like, what that feels like. And that's not true of all of Israel. You have to be within range of the people who are choosing to fire off these rockets. Do I think that every Palestinian wants rockets? No, I don't. Do I think that both sides are taught very poorly on how to get along together? Yes, that's a different story. But I also, I look around in the U.S. and we've got people here that are taught to not like others as well. One of the things also that I play for my religion classes is the song out of South Pacific, right? You have to be carefully taught.
Oh, yeah. I remember that song.
And in the 1950s, on a newsreel, and somebody has captured it, thank you, YouTube, there is a video with Rodgers and Hammerstein and the singer who sings it on Broadway.
Yeah.
And it's for National Brotherhood Week.
Wow.
And, and what I say to my classes is, look at this. 70 years ago, we knew that you have to teach children to hate. When are we going to stop doing that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
When are we going to stop doing that? When are we going to teach people something that I've said many, many times, and I say it every time on a Torah moment? We sing the Shema, and the Shema says, pay attention, Israel. God is approachable, and God is one. Right? If you believe that one creator God creates one universe, hello, everybody's got the same God. We might approach that same God differently, but it's the same one God. Other religions don't have a different God. They have a different approach to the one God.
Right.
Right. God is God. God is not Christian, Muslim, Buddhist. God precedes all of the above, period. If God is the creator, then God precedes religion, because religion is our approach and our beliefs about the divine and the cosmology and the cosmos.
What was so weird in hearing some of the Hamas folks is that they're saying that, the Muslims need access to the temple in Jerusalem, but they have access there. I think.
It's a muddy story. As people like to say, it's complicated.
I hate that, but yeah, I get it.
It's complicated.
I get it. Yeah.
So when in the late 60s, early 70s, when I was in Israel, because I was there, I lived in Jerusalem 2 different times. And when I was in Israel, there was a pathway that's still there that goes up to the Temple Mount, because where you come to the Western Wall, and the Western Wall is not a temple wall, folks. It is the outer courtyard wall of the temple campus, if you will. It's not the actual temple wall.
Oh, see, I thought it was.
No,
okay.
It's the outer walls protecting the temple complex. And the reality is nobody knows where the temple really is or was. I have a personal theory it may well be the same place where the Dome of the Rock is, because that rock has a lot of significance Jewishly. There's a lot of Jewish legends and stories about it. Mm-hmm. And the rock in Islam is where Muhammad in his dream travels to in order to ascend to heaven. Okay, so that's the connection for Islam. But I wouldn't be surprised if part of the ancient temple surrounded that rock, because it's huge.
Wow. Okay.
And it's an impressive rock. I've been inside there and looked at it. But I'll also say that as you walk up from the Kotel, the Western Wall, and we don't call it a Wailing Wall. That's a derogatory term used because Jews cried upon reaching it, and many still do. It's just a place to bare your heart to God, and so sometimes when you do that, you cry. And so it was a derogatory term referring to that, to all of that. And but when you walk up the funky little path that goes up to the Temple Mount, where you can go and walk where the temple once stood, there's a sign warning you, that we don't know where the temple really stood. We don't know where the Holy of Holies was. We don't know where only the Kohanim could walk. It was probably shaped something like an agiary, the Zoroastrian fire temples, because when Cyrus the Great let the Jews go back from Babylon after he conquers Babylon and releases the Jews from there, he sends his son with them to help rebuild the temple. And my guess is that since he was Zoroastrian, they probably used that as part of the model.
Zoroastrians are back again.
They're everywhere.
They're everywhere.
They're everywhere. And that's not a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
They teach about the battle of good and evil as well, and one God and all of that. That's not new.
Having never been there, I just,
Yeah.
It's the old Rodney King line. Can't we just get along?
Yeah.
It's just
absolutely
hard for me to imagine.
Well, it is. And I'll come back to that in a second. But on that walkway was a sign that said, Jews, do not go because we don't know where the temple was. So lest you tread where you shouldn't be, don't go up there. And, it's taken a number of years. But now we've got a group of somewhat extreme Jews trying to say, oh, no, this is our area, and, you get off. And, yeah, why can't we all get along? So it's complicated, and it's...
So there's like an ultra right-wing...
yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, there's so far to the right that they're almost touching the left on the far side of the moon.
Oh boy.
And unfortunately, they're being kind of a vigilante band, and that's not a healthy thing that's going on.
So those are the relatively new settlements there?
Yeah, you've got, you know, and I remember a neighbor of mine when I lived in Israel who said, you know, we want to create settlements to make it hard to give the land away. And so there's that element in the population. And the wars between brothers are some of the most vicious wars on the planet.
Yeah.
You know, and there's this desire to make somebody very, very different and other. There's a friend of mine who's the head of a seminary, of a Christian seminary, and she does a wonderful rendition of early church history, where she talks about these two people meet in the street and they say, "Oh, are you?" And she whatever reason she picked the Baptist group, right? "Are you Baptist?" "Yes, I'm Baptist." "Oh, are you New Light Baptist?" "Yes, I'm New Light." "Are you Holy?" And she goes down through 17 different schisms within the group, and finally there's this little tiny one-syllable difference between the two groups, and the one points to the other and says heretic.
Wow.
You know, you have to realize that, yeah, when you're too close, you make differences bigger. So there's a couple of things that are going on, and the Palestinian-Israeli stuff, they don't live in the same ways that we live, and it's not an American kind of thing, so it's very hard for us to understand the dynamic. And they talk about culture shock when you go and you start to realize different parts of the world live differently. And we're far from perfect in America. We're far from perfect. We do not treat all Americans, all human beings, as human beings in America, period. And if you question me, go out on a reservation in the deep part of it somewhere, go deep into the hoods, and you'll see that there's a really tamped down socioeconomic layer within America that if they ever got organized, we'd have a problem, because they have a lot of justified arguments that they're not getting a fair share of America's abundance. Similar situation inside Israel. There are groups that don't have the socioeconomic wealth that others are afforded. And from the Arab perspective, if you listen to what the Arabs, what they say to the border guards when there's a flare-up on the border, what they'll say to them is, "Where are your parents from? Were your grandparents born here, or were they born in Europe?" Yeah, there's this wave of European culture that comes with those who escaped from Europe and emigrated to Israel. And so when the Arabs complain about Jews, there's some code in there, and it's the European Jew. It's the blonde Jew. It's the...
I get it. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
right? It's not the Jew who looks, who you can be Jewish and Arab at the same time. You can be Christian and Arab. Arab is an ethnic, cultural, not cultural. Well, there's a culture to it too, but it's an ethnic group. It's a nationality, not a nationality exactly, because those words are not easy to apply in all the situations. But it's a group of indigenous people that come from the Arabian Peninsula and all of that. And they're not African, they're Arabian. They're not Asian, they're Arabian. And here's the piece. The largest number of Muslims are Asian, not Arab. And yet most people associate Arab with it.
Yeah.
But there are many, many Arab Christians. There are Arab Jews as well.
But in Jerusalem, Arabs and Jews kind of work side by side, though, don't they?
Yes and no.
Okay. Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
there's some mingling. There's not as much mingling, I don't think, as there was when I was there. I think the lines have gotten more isolated. So,
But it's funny because Casey Kasem and I used to go round and round on this all the time, and of course he's very much Palestinian, and I would think the Palestinians have more argument with Jordanians than they would Israelis.
you would, yeah. And there are
One
certainly
would-
some. There are certainly some of those because, right, the what's called the West Bank, right, that big chunk of land used to be part. Well, it was annexed by Jordan, right, because the UN created both
Yeah.
Transjordan and Israel in the partition, and Transjordan was annexed to Jordan, and then in the 6-Day War, when the Israelis took the West Bank, Jordan said, "Oh, okay, oh well," right, because the socioeconomic level of that land, the only thing useful to the Jordanians was the potash works at the bottom of the Dead Sea.
Oh,
And those are, that's still a Jordanian-Israeli cooperative venture because you have to work it from both sides to make it work. So, it's
It all
like
comes back to money.
it all always. And so, right, so the big question is that I think somebody bigger and more powerful than me needs to take a really good look at who benefits financially from this situation. Who benefits from the live lab testing of ordinances? Yeah. Okay. And who benefits from keeping particularly the folks in Gaza, so socioeconomically challenged? That's not to say that there aren't extremely wealthy and all of that going on. There is. There's a big divide between the haves and have-nots. And,
This almost sounds like what's going on in Africa.
it's going on all over the world. We have not learned. We've not made a conscious decision as a species to treat all of our members with respect. Right? Yeah. We've not learned to treat them with the instruction that comes out of the middle of the book of Leviticus that says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Hello. Right? It's what Jesus was quoting. Muhammad tried to say it again. It's not new, folks. Hinduism teaches it. Zoroastrianism teaches it. I don't know any religion that doesn't have it. Confucianism teaches it. And, everybody teaches it, but nobody practices it.
One would think it's common sense.
You would think, right? Or as one of my good friends in California put it, you don't make peace with your friends. You've already got peace. The only way you make peace, the only way you destroy your enemies, is by converting them to friends and allies.
Ooh.
Ethnic cleansing does not work. You don't have to look very far in history to see that. It doesn't work. Keeping people economically poor may work in a very short term, but it doesn't work long term. It creates far more discord, conflicts, wars, etc., than treating people with respect. When you convert your enemy into a friend or an ally, then you can make peace. Then and only then. Right? In Jewish scriptures it says if our neighbors are in conflict, how can there be peace for us? So until somebody takes a compassionate look at distributing wealth in an incentive-based, healthy environment, we're going to see continued conflict. Somebody is benefiting. Somebody is raking in the profits, the windfalls. And we can look here at the U.S. People profited from Katrina horribly.
Oh, yeah.
At others'
Oh, yeah.
great expense.
Yeah.
There are still people living today who cannot go back to their homes in Katrina.
Right.
There is no excuse for not rebuilding in this amount of time, period, other than socioeconomic inequality. Right? You look at COVID. Some people are paying a dear price and suffering financially. Others are getting a windfall.
It's interesting when we were up at the state basketball tournament with IRSC, and you see a lot of the rebuilding going on in Niceville and other places up by the Air Force Base. And was talking with the athletic director at Northwest Florida, and I asked him, I said, how are things in Mexico Beach? He said, nothing's changed.
Yeah.
I said, wait a minute. So they're rebuilding Panama City. They're rebuilding your community. What about that one? He said, it may never happen.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, really?
Yeah.
But again, it's kind of like what you said. It's the poor community, poor area.
There's a lot of socioeconomic stuff going on in the world. And most of it, the folks that are doing the pushing can often couch it in words that almost sound reasonable. My sister-in-law and her son lived, kind of live now in Mevo Medellin, which is, as I said, it's not in Jerusalem, it's a distance away. And it's a moshav, which is a community, and they own plots of land and they own their homes, but there are community facilities that service it, that are shared.
Like community farms or something like that?
Yeah, stuff like that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so they've got some private stuff, and they've also got... And this particular one was destroyed 2 years ago, and on the 33rd of Omer, so it's not that long ago, with a fire. A forest fire came through and just wiped out the entire community.
Wow.
And it's 2 years. And Israel's first approach was, just disband and go elsewhere. And the community is like, no, we really, we like each other and we want to stay in community. Plus, we have this land, and what are you going to, how do you compensate for the land? And so they've cleared out most of the debris from the forest fire because it totaled most of the houses. There were a few buildings remaining. And they put in what they call little caravan housing, little modular housing for the residents to live in right now. And
We've been there with hurricanes.
My sister-in-law is living in one of those, and she has 2.5 years where she has to rebuild her house on the land or forfeit it. Yeah, so there's a real desire.
That's the Israeli state government dictating that. Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not very long.
No.
Wow.
So, and it's not like the government's coming in and helping them do it.
Why?
That's the other piece.
They're just dictating. They oh God.
Yeah. Because what they really, really want is they really want to break up the community. They didn't set the fire, but
they're not exactly.
They're not helping them rebuild.
They're not crying that the fire occurred. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
So and that's a relatively wealthy community. They're not they're not impoverished. So, you look at how governments treat the low end, the low socioeconomic group. There's a tendency to say, well, they don't really contribute anything because they're not wealthy. Well, I'm sorry. Without them, a lot of the things that society needs don't get done because they take whatever jobs they can get. That's not good. We instead need to educate and elevate everybody and find ways to do the jobs.
Like they're not growing the food that the people are eating in the entire state?
Yeah.
Oh, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that still needs to be worked on, and I don't have all the answers, but I really have just a really strong gut hit that, as I've said at other times, if everybody on the planet had enough food to eat, clothing to put on their bodies to shelter them, and basic minimum health care, we'd have a lot less conflict on the planet. If we devoted a fraction of the energy we do to building walls and gates, then we could have a much more peaceful planet. There'd still be divides.
You've been saying that for years.
Yeah. We need to wise up as a species and recognize that, like everything else, we're only as strong as our weakest link. And when we look at a conflict like the conflict that's going on, there needs to be a serious, hard look at who benefits, who financially benefits from it, who politically benefits from it. And then you're going to see the causes, the root causes. There are people who can be manipulated and whipped up. As you were talking about psychological warfare. It's not new. It's not new. Been around for millennia. So on that cheerful note, we're about to come this weekend and remember receiving the tablets. And may everyone have a wonderful Shavuot festival this coming week. And God willing, I'll be here next week for Ask a Rabbi. This is Rabbi Shafir Loeb from Congregation Eitz Chayim, your Jewish home on the Treasure Coast.
You've been listening to Ask a Rabbi right here on WPSL, Port St. Lucie. Talk of the Treasure Coast, webcaster to the world.